So this is part 2 of the segment, as you can see, and the reason this one is really hilarious is because you've got a $150,000+ a year bourgeois 29-year-old champagne socialist basically guilting and shaming people into believing her rhetoric while she cuts up potatoes and live streams on her Instagram. This is just really hilarious, but there are some interesting points to make off of some of the things she says, so let's dig in.
Our planet is going to face disaster if we don't turn this ship around. And so it's basically like there's scientific consensus that the lives of children are going to be very difficult.
Well, very difficult is a relative term. I'm assuming you mean more difficult, but even that statement would require some degree of qualification. Just saying their lives will be more difficult or very difficult doesn't really explain a great deal of common trends amongst Americans that, frankly, just 10 years ago were luxuries. I mean, access to a smartphone is nearly ubiquitous, and with that access comes access to information. And honestly, need I say more, but I know you're talking about the climate and physical phenomenon. So if you're saying that young people will have to deal with a 1 or 2 degree warmer net climate, then yeah, just like my parents had to deal with the same thing relative to their parents, my grandparents, we'll also have to deal with an ever-increasing obese population, but that's indicative of a society that has either too much food, or markets unhealthy and foolish dietary practices, or, in my own opinion, is probably a little bit of both. You know what you and I don't have to deal with? That my parents and probably your grandparents had to deal with? Polio. Alex, polio. It's nearly non-existent. Here is a 57-year trend of tuberculosis in the U.S. And notice that even as the number of cases per 1,000 declines, the total number is declining relative to a growing population. What about congenital rubella? Looks like we've licked that one. And finally, the 2 greatest milestones in medicine. Polio is virtually non-existent, and in 1980, the World Health Organization declared the planet free from smallpox. To such a level, in fact, they had to store and file samples of it in case we were ever affected by a disease mimicking smallpox symptoms. Europe was decimated by the Black Plague. For Christ's sakes, we've undergone at least 5 extinction-level events over the course of global existence. The period that our planet has existed. The human race will adapt and overcome, I promise. But the fucking hubris to believe that human beings could actually make a concerted effort to destroy the planet is a stretch in and of itself. But to think that we could just destroy it by accident, by simply, oops, we slipped and fell, and now our atmosphere is essentially that of the planet Mercury. The unbelievable pretense by which these people reason is absolutely mind-boggling, I swear to God.
And it does lead, I think, young people to have a legitimate question. Is it okay to still have children?
This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Is it okay to have children? Alex, having children is and always has been a decision or byproduct of 2 individuals engaging in the genesis of human posterity. Procreation is in fact the single physiological progenitor of the human existence. It's the horizon upon which mankind continues. So in that case, yes, Alex, it will always be okay to have children. What couples generally have to decide is whether or not the environment in which they rear their children is conducive to safely rearing a child. And by that, I mean your parents decided to move from the Bronx to Westchester. Probably because when you were a child, the Bronx was like the fucking demilitarized zone.
And, I mean, not just financially, because people are graduating with $20,000, $30,000, $100,000 worth of student loan debt.
Then maybe they should invest in an education that gives them the skills to pay the bills. By that I mean stop investing in mindless fucking gender studies degrees that get you nowhere. Maybe, Alex, just maybe, you could encourage them to invest in a STEM degree that will help them save the fucking planet!
And so they can't even afford to have kids in a house, but...
Honestly, that's the biggest issue. Encourage people to stop playing keeping up with the Joneses like you obviously are with your luxury apartment in the Washington Navy Yard, and start living responsibly and within their means. If I was making your salary, I'd either buy a house, which would really be unethical for a representative from outside the DC area to do, or I'd rent a shitbox and pocket the money. But Given the recent revelations about the financial dealings of your staff and your administration, I'd be remiss if I didn't say you might just be a swamp creature reaping the lucrative benefits of a congressional salary, which simultaneously gives you the power and platform to espouse your ideology.
Also, just this basic moral question, like, what do we do? And even if you don't have kids, there are still children here in the world, and we have a moral obligation to them, to leave a better world for them.
This is honestly where I'd invoke the Milton Friedman theory on moral obligation and say that we don't actually have an obligation, but I hope we'd have a compassion for our fellow man. I only have an obligation to my own family, so in that case, frankly, Alex, fuck yourself. You're not going to guilt and shame me into changing my already moderately responsible lifestyle because your bleeding heart wants to save the poor, sick, dying children of the world by fixing the poor, sick, dying planet. No one should take any stock in this style of guilt. What's so obviously sociopathic about this kind of statement is that you're trying to shame people with a fucking smile on your face.
And this idea that if we just, I've been working on this for X amount of years, it's like not good enough. Like, we need a universal sense of urgency.
And to this I say, Rome wasn't built in a day. But I think about the great strides we've made in just the past century. My grandfather was farming with the same kind of equipment his predecessors used for hundreds of years, and when he died there were massive tractors and machines that were doing exponentially more labor in a fraction of the time. If necessity is the mother of invention, because it always has been, and there is a market to thwart climate change, which there most certainly is, then allow the market to unleash its forces upon the world. You don't need a sense of urgency, you just need a motivation to make it happen. And since you and your lackeys seem to have stoked the fear of global death, I think there will most certainly be a market for fixing that problem.
And people are trying to introduce watered down proposals that are frankly going to kill us.
How? Proposals to help the environment are going to kill us? I think you're trying to say they'll slow the bleeding instead of just stopping the bleeding. But Jesus Christ, I can't see the logical conclusion to let's figure out how to quell man-made climate change is going to kill us. I just don't see that. I mean, Jesus Christ, you just sound crazy.
A lack of urgency is going to kill us. It doesn't matter if you agree that climate change is an important issue. At this point, it doesn't matter. If you believe climate change is a problem, that's not even the issue. The issue is how urgently you feel we need to fix it.
Alex, I laughed at that clip for a very long time, and I cut out a lot of the laughter and re-recorded this to spare the viewers. And I laughed because, the extremity of you implying that we're going to die in 10 years, everyone is going to die in 10 years unless we turn this ship around. And then you said it doesn't even matter if you agree that climate change is a major issue. That's so absolutely hilarious. But, I mean, if that's the case, honestly, you can just toss off and I'm going to go about living my life because what the fuck does it matter? But a better man than I said it perfectly, so I'm just going to leave it to a scholar by the name of Dr. Peter Venkman to give you your last insightful piece of advice.
Sometimes shit happens, someone has to deal with it, and who are you going to call?